the first time I ever did a facilitated session for somebody. At the end of the session, when she was gone, I'm packing my stuff, I get in the car, and tears just started like streaming down my face. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I just had the most professionally and personally affirming experience of my entire life. I feel like I have finally found where I'm supposed to be, what I was born to do, what my life's purpose and calling is.
Welcome to Unbehaved. I'm Meghan Dunbar, and you just heard from the incredible Mikki Vogt. And if you listened to part 1 of this series from last week, yes, this is that Mikki. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to the previous episode yet, Mikki is the facilitator who did my Psilocybin-assisted therapy session that I detail in part 1. But Mikki's story is so much bigger than my experience with her. Mikki is a licensed counselor and entrepreneur, co-founder of one of Colorado's first licensed psilocybin healing centers, and one of the people who literally co-wrote the safety screening protocols used in Colorado for psilocybin-assisted therapy that have now been adopted in Oregon as well. Before she was any of that, she spent years working in prisons, then in community mental health, before deciding to start facilitating psilocybin sessions as a harm reduction provider. But that was before it was even legal, when it could have cost her everything. In this conversation, we get into why she made that call, why traditional therapy hits a ceiling that psychedelic-assisted therapy seems to break through, the story of a young man who'd had daily seizures for 17 years and what happened during his psilocybin session with her, what a bad trip actually is versus a challenging one, and why the model of legal psilocybin therapy that we're building in this country, the model Mikki helped write, needs public support to survive. If you've been listening to part 1 and wondering how any of this is actually possible, this is the episode that answers that question. And even if you haven't listened to part 1 and are just curious about the current landscape and benefits of psilocybin-assisted therapy, you'll learn everything you want to know and more in this episode. Let's get into it. Mikki. My experience with you is that you are doing the thing that you are lit up about. You are passionate about it, you are excellent at it, and you care about it. How did you come to be in this very unique profession?
That is a great question. I am lit up about it. I'm super passionate about it. It feels like for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been living, breathing, sleeping, eating this. And I remember the first time I ever did a facilitated session for somebody. Had been a client of mine who knew it was the first time for me and trusted me to hold that container for her, which was in and of itself just beautiful. And I remember at the end of the session, when she was gone, I'm packing my stuff, I get in the car, and tears just started like streaming down my face. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I just had the most professionally and personally affirming experience of my entire life. I feel like I have finally found where I'm supposed to be, what I was born to do, what my life's purpose and calling is. That was probably about 6 years ago now. And I had told myself, not everyone you do is going to be like this. And over time, it's not going to be as exciting and it's not going to feel the same way. And I was so wrong. Every single one of these I do is beautiful and profound. And the connection I have with the journeyer is probably one of the greatest gifts I'll ever experience, and getting to witness such a sacred experience for them is just such an honor. And every single one, it fills me up. I'm super jazzed. I'm rejuvenated. I come home on a total high, and I haven't even touched the medicine myself. So it's great. So, I mean, I absolutely love what I do. I would have never thought that I would be here. My master's degree is in forensic psychology. And so when I first started working in the field, I was primarily working in prisons, jails, correctional facilities of some sort, community reentry programs, working with really severe pervasive mental illness, dual diagnosis, co-occurring substance abuse disorders, incarceration, all of that kind of stuff. High rates of recidivism, high rates of homelessness, high rates of emergency system use. And so getting to really work with the real nitty-gritty. And in doing so, I got to create these amazing relationships with populations that are so typically unseen and disregarded and stigmatized. And in getting to work with these individuals, it really was a reminder that we are all just human, trying to survive, trying to make our way through this planet and the life that we're dealt. And these people are just like you and me. They have learned a set of coping responses. They have learned how to survive in a way that keeps them moving forward. And while the behaviors they've chosen to keep them moving forward might be maladaptive and cause a lot of consequences, the need is relevant. And so if we can see them as humans with relevant needs that are the same as yours and mine, all of a sudden, they're not this bad, terrible person. There's somebody who has been wounded by society and needs repair, needs support, needs to be seen, needs love and affection and attention. And when they start to receive that, it's a completely different version of them that you get to work with. And so that was just a totally amazing experience for me and really confirmed for me why I do this work. At some point, I did get really tired of going to prison every day for work. I am a colorful person. I'm very bubbly, and it at times really started to wear on me that I had to go through the whole check-in process and hear the gates and the bars closing behind me and be in this like drab, poorly lit place. And just, it got to be a bit overwhelming, and I started to burn out and wasn't providing the best of what I could provide for these people, which isn't fair for them. And so I decided to transition into working into community mental health in high intensity treatment settings and community-based service settings. Very similar populations, still did a lot of the community reentry stuff, where then I was getting to work with people I had worked in corrections with as they were coming out and get to support them in community reentry, stabilization, mental health treatment, housing, vocational support. And so that was where I really got to see the power of interdisciplinary wraparound services and how important community is just in general for health and wellness. And during this period of time, I started tracking all of the research that was going on with MDMA and veterans and PTSD, and was just blown away by some of the outcomes we were seeing, and was facing a reality that I really wanted to work in that psychedelic realm, but was not going to be able to do so within community mental health, knowing that that's all state government funding and evidence-based practices, and that's not where psychedelics were at the time. That there was no way I was going to be able to work with psychedelics within that setting. And so I started to develop my own private practice on the side and just started getting that going, not working with psychedelics, just building a practice, learning how to manage a private practice and work on my own and figure out the ins and outs and get all set up as a business owner, because I, as a clinician, am not inherently an entrepreneur. And which people find very surprising when they meet me and are like, "Oh, wow, you own 3 businesses." And that's definitely been the hard way, which seems to be my forte, is doing things the hard way. So I started doing that on the side. And then right before COVID, fully transitioned to private practice and never looked back. Was so happy with that decision. Got myself credentialed with insurance and Medicaid and all the things, and that I still wanted to promote accessibility. And then really dove into research on the psychedelics, experimenting with my own relationship. I got to have a really beautiful experience with an underground practitioner who held space for me and had such a transformative experience. I'd used mushrooms, MDMA, psychedelics before, and already knew there was something significant there. But then having that specific container being held in such an intentional way, got to see really what the outcomes can be when you bring intention and mindfulness into it, have the safe space to have the experience, and then really focus yourself on integration afterwards. It's also an experience that taught me some of the risks to doing this in an unregulated setting, and that in coming to that as a clinician, I am familiar with best practices and ethics and wasn't seeing all of those being championed in that space. And so felt like, okay, yes, I really want this for my clients, but I want to do this in a way that is ethical and safe. So at that point, I started hammering out my own safety screening protocols, reviews in alignment with what I had been taught as a therapist and addictions counselor were best practices, and was looking at the research about drug interactions and all these things, and was doing my best to try to screen out anybody that wasn't relevant for this. And at this time, I only started to offer this to clients in my private practice who I'd been working with for quite some time, and would put them through the screening protocol and work with providers when I could.
Is it still technically illegal at this point?
Technically, this was not yet decriminalized.
Okay.
And so I was doing this as a harm reduction provider, as an addictions counselor, but would go into details with my clients about what that meant, what kind of services I was providing, clarity that I'm not the one giving them the medicine, that the medicine is being sourced from somewhere else by them, and that they're just asking me to sit with them for harm reduction purposes. All of those things to try to keep it as up and up as possible at that point. I also felt like when people were asking me, well, what if you get grieved? What if you get reported? I said, that's a risk I'm willing to take, because at that point, I was taking some significant safety precautions, had consulted with other people to really understand risks that I was going to be taking on, and when it came to health and wellness for the clients I was working with. And so at any point, the client who was being considered, it was only pursued if I felt very strongly that the potential benefits outweighed any obvious risks after doing all the screening and assessments. And so in the idea of taking an oath to do no harm, my thought there was, if I've been working with a client for so long and they've tried treatment with me and treatment with others and different modalities and haven't gotten to where they want to be, and I've now screened them and shown that the risk of doing this is significantly low and that the potential benefit of outcome is there for them, then would withholding something I know would work and wouldn't be harmful, would that be doing harm? And I guess in my head, it felt like it would be. If I know something works and I know they're eligible for it and it's not going to put them in danger, why wouldn't we try it? Especially in that psilocybin has such a high safety profile. It's one of the safest molecules we have. It's even safer than Benadryl. It doesn't have any risk of dependence. There's no risk of overdose. It's not going to give you stomach ulcers or ruin your kidneys like Tylenol. If we're so willing to put all these other things into our bodies without a second thought, why wouldn't we use a natural medicine, plant medicine that is shown to have one of the highest safety profiles before I'm going to go and use these other things that we know have risk with them? It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's where I decided I came here to do a job. I came here to help people and support people and see them as a person and not just a file or a client number. And I'm going to continue doing that. And if regulatory agencies don't like the way that I'm doing it, then maybe I don't need the regulatory agency. And that was kind of, I don't know if that was stupid or courageous or maybe a little bit of both.
Those are the best decisions, in my opinion. But I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing this story. You and I have worked together on my own journey, but I haven't dug into this with you. So, of course, there's so many things that I want to go through here. But I feel in awe of what you did, because you were so convinced of the efficacy of this and you understood the risks and you understood the literature, but you're putting your own private practice on the line to do this.
It took, I mean, there were definitely moments where I was questioning, why am I doing this? And it kept coming back to, because I really believe in this. I really believe in it. And I didn't start doing it with people until after I had already received training. Now, at that point, we didn't have DORA approved training programs, but there were absolutely training providers out there for harm reduction purposes that were providing courses in psilocybin and harm reduction services and all the things. And so I did a lot of training from various different providers, did a lot of apprenticing and shadowing, seeing how other people were doing it, did a lot of understanding of indigenous roots of the medicine. What does ceremony mean? Who am I and who am I not? What is my own lineage with natural medicine? So really explored all of those things before ever feeling like I was in a position where I could confidently do this with somebody else. And so by the time I did start doing it, I felt pretty convinced, like, okay, if I'm going to get reported or grieved, I have a good argument. And if they decide that they're not on the bandwagon with this, then I'll find a different way to make a living.
So great.
I know I say that out loud and I'm like, and I'm a mom and a wife, and they probably were not very appreciative that I was willing to risk everything.
But that also speaks to how powerful this is. And
Right.
so you talked about your first time facilitating and you're calling your mom and you're crying, and then how that just became the norm.
Mm-hmm.
What did you experience in those first few sessions in terms of the healing or the journey or the processing that people were able to do that felt so different than all of the work that you'd done before this?
So what I was getting to see is in traditional therapy, even when we start using somatic experiencing therapies like EMDR and stuff like that, where it's really not just traditional talk therapy, it's not just a cognitive approach, we're really trying to approach the whole system. It seemed like and EMDR took this a little bit farther. And I am a fan of EMDR, but it seemed like you would get to this point where we have the insight. I know I'm smart. I know I'm likable. I know I'm worthy of taking up space. I know that I can be successful. I know that I'm competent. I know that I'm significant. I know these things up here. People tell them to me every day. And there is a part of me that knows that rationally to be true. The belief system that I have developed in experiential, repetitive, time-based learning throughout my life is not the insight. The belief system is I'm not worthy and I'm not lovable and everybody will abandon me and I will always have to try again and I will never be somebody's first pick, right? That's the felt sense belief, right? Which is ultimately what ends up guiding the way that we experience ourselves, others, and the world around us. We see that through this colored lens of the belief system, not of rational insight. There's this disconnect. And like I said, EMDR seems to get us a little bit closer to bridging those two things, but I was still finding that clients were falling short. And maybe I'm just not doing the EMDR effectively, right? I mean, I don't want to blame any kind of modality for not working. And that I think there's so many great modalities out there, but I think psychedelics specifically are unique in that they seem to be this bridge between what I rationally know insightfully up in my brain and what I, at a gut instinct, gut level, feel to be true in my nervous system, in my body, in my heart, in my soul, right? And so when we can bridge those two things, all of a sudden I'm able to experience myself, others, and the world around me in a completely different light. I'm able to engage with information that has always been up there, but see it in so many different ways that my consciousness now has become so expanded that I can consider so many different things and choose what I want for myself, not feel like I've got these blinders on that only allows me to see one path forward. So that's what I think is so profound about psychedelics. And what I love is that the research is showing this, right? That it's going in and it is creating this high level of entropy or chaos in the brain, which is allowing us to break free of all these rigid belief patterns, neural pathways and connections that kind of dictate how we organize the information about the world and ourselves. And we ascend above that and get to see everything as fluid and say, how would I like to organize information moving forward? Not, this is the way. I have to believe this. And sometimes that's small, little things. And sometimes that's huge, huge things like philosophical meaning of life versus the routine I want to engage with every morning. You know, that's going to be different for everybody. But that's what I feel is so different about psychedelics than anything else. And in acknowledging these other modalities, I really think that psychedelics is one more tool in our tool belt that should be used in conjunction with other approaches to transformation, healing, expanded consciousness, right? So for therapists out there, if you're going to get trained in something like IFS or somatic experiencing, why not also get trained in this? It's not for everybody in the same way that those modalities are not for everybody. It's just one more tool.
All right. I want to keep going on the research part. Is there anything else research-wise that blew you away at the start that you were like, I have to engage with this? What is the research telling us?
So I was really lucky in that I got to work as a therapist on the CU Anschutz clinical trials, focusing on using psilocybin to address depression and existential distress related to end of life and cancer diagnoses. And so that's where I really got to see how this addresses more existential experiencing and these things that really contribute to some of the distress that we walk through life with, of what is the meaning of life? What does it mean to live a full life? What does it mean to die? What is a legacy? What do I believe happens next? What do I believe makes this life worth it? Who do I want to be in this world? How do I want to be remembered? All of those things come up in these sessions when that's the intention in that setting, in that, right? And so in that clinical setting, that was the focus. And it was profound. And I got to witness people going from this place of severe depression and just devastation and defeat to feeling like they could go through the active stage of dying, because that's just one stage of our cyclical life, right? With agency and with say and with hope and optimism about what that process was going to look like, how it was going to feel, what the values that they were championing during that process were going to be, what was going to make that meaningful to them. And in doing so, they weren't just focused on the end, they were focused on processing time left. And that really changes a lot of things for people. The other thing with the research is these individuals are coming in with a significant sense of hope. And in these double-blind random control trials, they may or may not be getting the medicine, right? There is a 50% chance they're going to end up in the placebo group. And so it was also a reminder to me of how hopeful other people are, that even at that point in life, that they're willing to engage with this, not knowing what outcome will be for them, just because they're hopeful enough. And so that is profound. So that's like a big chunk of the research, right? Is end of life, palliative care, all of that focus. But we're also seeing research, of course, in PTSD, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, traumatic brain injury. We're seeing research with dementia and Alzheimer's, and we're seeing research with chronic pain management, like fibromyalgia and chronic pain from injury. We're seeing research with regaining movement after paralysis from West Nile virus. We're seeing research on how this helps with seizure disorders. And there's just research coming out about so many different areas that when people say, well, what can you use this for? I'm starting to find that the list is shorter to acknowledge what we probably couldn't use this for, which is also really exciting. And I say that with a caveat of these medicines have been stewarded by peoples for thousands and thousands of years. It's an ancient wisdom, and it's an ancient practice. And the molecule is not doing this alone, right? So in all of these settings, but specifically in the original, like our OG, where did this come from? What makes this profound is the community, right? It's the preparation in the container and the integration that's happening afterward. It's the connection with self and others. It's experiencing that you matter in a greater system and that people see you and that your transformation is worthy of being witnessed. And so like when you look at these indigenous cultures who have been doing this, we talk about prep and integration. It's not talked about there. It's not that it's absent. It's that that's the lived experience, right? They do this in a communal setting with their family members, with their community members. They're living preparation and then they're living integration. It's built in. They wouldn't consider doing this outside of that, right? They wouldn't consider just going into the doctor, taking it, and then going home and not talking to anybody about it. So we use this language as a way to streamline this into the system we're familiar with, but we have to understand that we can't use natural medicines, which work in an ecosystem that we are a part of. You can't take the medicine out of the ecosystem and expect it to do the same thing. We need to remember that what we're trying to do is rejoin the ecosystem, that we're shifting, not the medicine.
Yeah. You mentioned epilepsy, and
Yeah.
at the end of our session together, you were telling my husband and I a story about a gentleman that you worked with epilepsy, and I would love to help bring the research to life a little bit. Can you help us understand what happened with this man that you're working with?
Yes. So anecdotal, right? I want to put out there, this is anecdotal and it's profound, which is very exciting. So this guy, he contracted an infection, an illness that went turned into a brain infection at the age of 10 or 11. And with that, he started experiencing severe seizures, 5, 6 seizures a day, that became totally disruptive in his life. I mean, full seizures. And so, of course, family took him to doctors and treatment teams and all the things. And he went through all this imaging, and all these different medical teams were in disagreement about what's the origin site of the seizures, what's going wrong. So you think that they would have approached this with conservatism, since the boy was so young and they didn't really know what was going on. Unfortunately, what we think should happen is not always what happens. And this poor gentleman went through 3 brain resections and 5 depth probes, all before he was 13 years old.
Oh my God.
And it did not make anything better. It only made things worse. It severely slowed down his cognitive processing. It made it so that he couldn't get through a whole day of school. I mean, it just really disrupted life. And now he's in his late 20s. He's been dealing with this now for 15 to 17 years. This has been his
daily
life.
seizures.
Yeah, of daily seizures, and has tried different medications. Things weren't really working. He finally got on a medication called Xcopri, I believe, and they were able to reduce the seizures down from like 5 to 6 to maybe 2 or 3 a day, which significant improvement, but still not great. And then his neurologist, I guess, had been reading about psilocybin and the potential of what it's doing. And so his neurologist and his parents reached out to me and said, how do you feel about working with him? And we know that you can't guarantee anything, but per what the neurologist was reading, he said it might be interesting to try to do this with this gentleman once every 3 months and see what might happen and if this would be helpful. And so I started working with this individual. We did a lot of prep. So for this individual, it wasn't like 2 prep sessions and then we're in. We did a lot of prep, and I got to know him and I got to know his family and his story and background and kind of what his dreams and aspirations are and what kind of supports were already available and what he wanted life to look like moving forward. Amazing individual. I mean, truly amazing individual. And then we finally got to his first administration session, December 2025. And I had gone over the safety plan and emergency response plan for if a seizure starts during the administration session. His mom stayed on site. I had direct contact with his neurologist. So we had all of the safety things in place. We get an hour in and he is smiling and relaxed in ways that I've never gotten to witness him in the last several months. It was beautiful. Because of that, we were like, let's go ahead and do the booster. And so we give him a small booster dose. And within about 15 minutes of giving him the booster dose, I witnessed his body seize and just lock up. And he does this like quick inhale. And I'm thinking in my head, oh God, here we go. And of course, I'm getting really nervous. And so per our safety plan, mom had said, don't administer the emergency medicine until the seizure has lasted for longer than 5 minutes. So I see him lock up. I see the breath. I see the eyes kind of glaze. And so I start the timer. And it's interesting because up to this point, he had been talking to me with his eyes closed. And he said, it's as if I can see an entity or a form trying to push the seizure toward my body. And then he seized. He locked up. He starts to seize and twitch. And 8 seconds goes by. And it stops. And he breathes out. And he says, and I'm able to just push the form away from my body. And it pushes the seizure out. And then he dropped back into his journey, which had nothing to do with his seizures. He drops back into his journey, and he journeyed for the next 6 hours with no seizure at all, was completely calm, his body completely relaxed, his hands, like he had one hand that was really tight and painful. By the end, it was completely loose, and he was using it and was like, oh my gosh, my hand. And between then and March, which is when we did his second, he had 1 seizure. One seizure. And then we did his second administration in March, and almost the exact same thing happened. First hour in, everything's great. I give him a booster. About 7 minutes after giving the booster, we see the seizure onset. I start the timer. 11 seconds in, it's finished and he drops back into his journey. And so I've been doing ongoing integration with this gentleman and working with his neurologist, and it's an ongoing care plan. And he's got a lot of wraparound support. So there's a lot of community. He's in vocational stuff. He's in art stuff. He's in a coding program. Part of that integration is while he's in that state of neuroplasticity, really putting in all of the other supports that are going to benefit him in learning new skills and starting new behaviors and all the things. And it's just been profound. I mean, the outcome, he's now in a coding program. He's teaching art classes. It's really amazing. It's truly amazing.
And with the seizure that he had in between the first one and the second one, even though he wasn't using the medicine, was it still the same experience for him where he could see the entity and push it away, even though he wasn't in that state?
Yes. Yes. I had him draw out in integration the entity, the form he had seen. And it was like this metal sphere thing, right? I don't even know how to describe it. So he drew it out. And so we started doing imagery exercises where when he starts to feel the aura or the tremors or the whatever, because there's always some kind of like sign, when he starts to feel that he's imagining that form now that he saw in the journey, bringing the seizure to his body. And he immediately starts this imagery of pushing back towards it, both physically, but as well as energetically. And so the seizure he had, we think, was actually brought on by significant heat. He was at the gym, he was sitting in the sauna. And so we think that's might have been what it was. But this one lasted for maybe 2 minutes. And then he was fine. So this is where I like to acknowledge, like, we need to bridge the sacred with the clinical, right? And I think that is a really good example of where we can say we're going to be able to see a lot through science. We're going to see a lot through imaging and blood work and pre and post measurements and assessments and evaluations and all the things. And that's amazing. And ultimately, there is something at work here that is ancient and profound and sacred that I truly believe will never be caught in an image, will not be caught in a random control trial, that there is something greater that happens when you reconnect with Earth and the ecosystem of which you're a very natural part of. When we're in right relationship with the system that we originated from, that in and of itself is going to change how we're experiencing self and the world and our health and wellness and the way that we're seeing things. And we know that mindset is profound. I mean, we look at a lot of research where cancer survivors or people with cancer, like those who have this really hopeful mindset, and they do a lot of visualization during their chemo treatments and all the things. And they have these, their prognosis is better. They have better outcomes. Whereas those who go into it with a really poor mindset and they're pretty much have succumbed to the defeat and all the things, like they don't get the same results. And so I think, there is this piece of how connected do I feel with this? How much do I believe in it? And also realizing, again, it's not just the molecule. It is our relationship with it and what we're willing to do. Are we willing to be a contributing party to our self-healing? Are we willing to acknowledge and return to the reality that we are self-healing systems, biologically, physiologically, emotionally, soulfully, spiritually? We are self-healing systems. That's how we were created. And we live in a self-healing ecosystem, our world. It's only been in recent hundreds of years that we've started to externalize this source of expertise on how many letters are at the end of somebody's name so that they can tell me about me instead of my body and my mind and my soul telling me about me. Now I need somebody who's gone through 8 years of medical school and who doesn't know me, but they're going to tell me about me. And instead of saying, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work with this natural medicine that is of the earth, that has really low risk to it. And I'm going to unlock communication with that medicine with my inner healing wisdom. And the medicine and my inner healer are going to do for me what needs to be done. And they're going to show me what I need to do to use insight and awareness gained and turn it into embodied, lasting change. And that's the work that I will do.
Yeah. So I did a journey with you, and I have talked to quite a few people about it because for me, it was profound. And when I talk to people about this, a lot of people say, oh, I want to contribute to my self-healing, as you just mentioned, but I am afraid of letting go of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that part of it, like, especially if you've never even experimented with these things recreationally, which I had beforehand. So I had somewhat of a level of comfort with this. And I was like, so Mikki, you're saying you're going to give me the largest dose of mushrooms I've ever had in my entire life. And then I'm going to sit with you in a room for 6 to 8 hours while you are stone cold sober and be just tripping balls and like the most vulnerable version of myself. And you're just going to sit there and watch me. And I was like, I am not comfortable with that level of vulnerability. And you were like, this is what I do. You help me work through it. So for the folks who are on the, I don't want to let go of control, I'm terrified of being that vulnerable in front of another human train. What do we say to them to help them move beyond this like rigid, I have to control everything and I hate being vulnerable in front of other people?
I would say that checks out you're human. If you're not nervous at all about this experience, I kind of ask you, like, are you familiar with what we will be doing? I mean, even in my shoes, you know, when I think about being the journeyer, no matter how many times I've done this, facilitated or journeyed myself, anytime I go to journey, I'm nervous as fuck. Like, oh my gosh. And even in my head, there's that rational part, the insightful part that says, Mikki, you've done this, you're familiar with it, you know what it is, you're going to come out on the other side. But then there's the felt sense that's like, but I'm giving up control and I don't know where I'm going to go and I don't know what I'm going to see and I don't know if I feel equipped for that. And right. And it's all the uncertainty that inherently breeds anxiety comes up. And that's great because that's our nervous system from an IFS perspective, our protectors doing their job to protect us. It's a reminder that I am functioning the way I'm supposed to function. And so in that place, I say, it's good that you're nervous. It means that you're invested in this and you care about your wellness and well-being. And you want to be careful that you're not doing something in which the risk outweighs any benefit. That's why I'm here, right? Is specifically my role is to assure or promise that I'm going to do everything I can do, screening wise, preparation wise, day of, and follow up to ensure that you are having the safest experience possible, that we are minimizing as much harm and discomfort as possible, and giving you a safe container in which you can shift your relationship with distress. Right? So that idea of not always being in control is not as scary moving forward, right? And that not being in total control in and of itself is not a life threat. Is it anxiety provoking? For sure. There's a lot of variables now that I need to be prepared for, that I don't control, but I need to be able to be ready to respond to. But I think when we can change our relationship to distress and say, distress in and of itself is not a bad thing. When I respond to the distress effectively, the way that I'm supposed to, distress is helpful and I don't need to get distressed that I'm distressed. And that is the importance of prep, wanting to make sure it's, okay, what I'm hearing you say is you don't trust me enough yet to be that vulnerable in front of me. That's fine. Let's do a few more sessions. What do you need to know about me? Would you like to meet here in the space where we're going to journey? What do you want to know about my background, my relationship with medicine? Let me walk you through the approach and what's going to happen that day of. And what do you need to feel ready? What do your parts need to feel ready? What are your protectors saying they're concerned is going to happen? Let's address that directly so that the whole system of you is coming on this journey and that we are, for the first time in your life, not steamrolling any part of you and making them suck it.
You have such a way of putting things in a way that my brain is like, oh, thank you. So my experience, we did 3 prep calls on Zoom where I literally came with notes and was like, here's everything that all the intellectual insights that you mentioned earlier that I've done in 6 years of therapy. I have them in chronological order and here's all my garbage. And then we did a full day of the plant medicine. I think I arrived at 9. I left around like 3:30ish or so when my husband picked me up. And then we did 3 integration Zoom calls afterwards. Is that pretty standard with most people that you work with?
I would say that my bare minimum that I insist upon is 2 prep, 2 integration. And that, like I said, the container, I think, is the most crucial part of this experience. And so it really is, how well are you prepping them for the experience so that they can be equipped to navigate any uncertainty, anywhere they might end up, any destabilization or dysregulation that happens. And then the integration in that they know they have support. They can talk about the awareness gained, the confusion of anything that came up. They can create meaning. You guys can work together to create a tangible plan for movement forward to say, okay, how do I want to apply this awareness and what am I changing in a day-to-day that will help me to embody greater change, a higher quality of life, a more fulfilling experience. And so I say minimum of 2 on each side. Ideally, personally, I believe that at least 3, 4 integrations is absolutely wonderful, and that it is about having community. So even if you're not doing more than 2 to 3 integrations with me, that either we've got you set up in a community that's supporting you and knows about your experience, and you have places and other people that you can talk to about it and process through it, and who are going to support you in your integration process, whether that be another therapist, a coach, a yogi, a best friend, whatever that might look like, as a community integration group, a circle that meets once a month, a community activity where you've got individuals who are like-minded, and as you are transforming and becoming what you want to be, a community that's going to support you in that and not question why you need to change, but just cheerlead the change. It's just this, okay, I'm seen, I'm heard, and there's a place for me to go, and I'm a part of something greater. And I think the integration is huge, and the community piece, having a family, a community, a psychedelic family, I think is one of the most important parts. And that I've said this before, we're going to treat an individual over and over and over and over again. We're going to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again until we treat the community that continues to wound the individual. And so if we're not approaching this in a community way, we're not learning anything from the medicine.
So how many journeys have you facilitated? And through all of those, have you ever had a negative response in terms of health issues? I have to call the hospital, like something has happened that is very bad here.
So I would say that over the last 5 years, I've probably now facilitated somewhere between 300 to 500 facilitation sessions. Some of those have been with repeat journeyers where we've done multiple sessions, and some of those are people who only do it once, maybe twice. When it comes to adverse events, what I teach my learners is that there's 3 tiers you want to consider. The first is acute expected effects of psilocybin, things like transient high blood pressure, feelings of queasiness, feelings of anxiety, distress, crying and sadness and grief, and yes, in fact, I'm hoping some of these things happen for you so that we can change your relationship with distress. I hope that some of these things are there. I don't want you to have a terrible time. I want you to have a meaningful time, right? And so I'm hoping for some of those things. So those are acute expected effects. It's when you take a lot of those acute expected effects and they become very severe, or you've got a combination of them, the sweating, the higher blood pressure, the flushing in the skin, where then I'm like, ooh, do we have a cardiovascular event risk right now? Right. So this is also where you need to use clinical judgment and listen to your intuition and know their medical background and their history and have done all the consulting and safety clearances and medical screenings and all the stuff so that you can determine when does an acute effect combined with other things or heightened in severity become an adverse event, where now there needs to be some type of intervention. And then what takes that just from an adverse event that you're dealing with in the session to a reportable adverse event that we're then calling Dora and letting them know about, calling EMS, like at what point are we getting outside emergency medical services or medical services involved? That would be what I would call a full-on adverse event. I've never, knock on wood, never had to do that. And I think the big thing there is that if you are diligently following best practices and ethical standards, and you're diligently screening, and you're considering background, and you're asking about medications, and you're asking the hard questions, and you're not facilitating through a scarcity mindset, so you're willing to say no to people, that's not going to happen because you've screened out the possibility for it to happen. That shouldn't be happening if you're following safe procedures. So I've never had to deal with that. Knock on wood, I hope I never have to deal with that. Now, I think there's a difference between a bad trip and a challenging experience. And again, I think the set and setting and the prep and integration are the biggest factors that help delineate between those two things. You're likely going to have a challenging experience for me. I hope you do, right? So that's really what I want you to have with me. What we do with that challenging experience is what makes it not a bad trip. The way I respond to you in your challenging experience and support you in that moment is what makes it not a bad trip. What we do in integration with that experience and find the meaning in it and how we're using the awareness gained in that is what makes it not a bad trip. A bad trip happens when we're not in a safe container. We don't have somebody who is holding space for our safety. We have mixed it with other substances. We haven't set an intention. We haven't gone through informed consent. We don't know what the risks are. We don't know how much we're taking. We don't know if the medicine is pure or what its potency is. We don't have mental health support. We have nobody to talk to afterwards. That is the recipe right there for a bad trip.
Yeah.
That's not what we work on in the regulated space.
So, speaking of the regulated space, I believe it's Colorado, Oregon, and New Mexico are the only places where we can do this at this point.
Yeah.
How did this come to be? How are we so lucky to be in Colorado? And what was your role?
So we passed back in 22 Senate Bill 290, which is what established the Natural Medicine Health Act, in which we decriminalized psilocybin amongst 4 other natural plant medicines and set up an advisory board to create the regulated program with psilocybin specifically in a regulated setting. And what sets us apart from New Mexico is that we don't do this in just a medical or clinical setting. So you don't have to have a diagnosis to do this. There doesn't need to be a referral from a treatment provider. You can come for spirituality purposes, consciousness expansion, personal transformation. You don't need to be pathologized in order to be relevant. So I love that way about how we've set that up. Psilocybin is not supposed to be a mental health medicine. It never was. It's not here to treat mental health. It's here to reconnect us with the soul that we are and the light that we're here to shine. Quoting David Anka, that's what the psilocybin is supposed to do. It's not about resolving a diagnostic pathology. And so we started with that bill. We created the advisory board. We set up the regulations and got the program started. It went live January 1st, 2025, where people were able to apply to be licensed facilitators. They were able to apply as natural medicine businesses to get licensed as healing centers, cultivators, manufacturers. You can get a licensed natural medicine handler license so that you can provide support services in a healing center. So there's all these different roles that you can play within the system that there's licensing and training and education for. So DORA oversees licensing for facilitators and training programs. And DOR, the Natural Medicine Division at DOR, oversees licensing for natural medicine businesses. So healing centers, cultivators, manufacturers. So that's the business side. DOR is the individual side and the education side. And so those two agencies have come together and are overseeing this. We've also bringing in Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, so CDPHE. They will be doing the data collection for the program, and they are also the one that oversees licensing for our testing labs. So all regulated medicine goes through testing, so we understand the purity and potency of each thing and know exactly to the milligram how much medicine we're giving an individual and how much of the other alkaloids are present in that natural medicine. And that will indicate and influence how they experience it with queasiness and euphoria and all that other kind of stuff. So that's all the places. I came into it having been working on the research at CU Anschutz, and I became a part of this organization called the Psychedelic Public Policy Partnership. And so PPPP, lots of Ps. And all of us volunteers who are just passionate about this and believe in it, and we're volunteering our time. And we started doing white papers and research to help advise and inform the advisory board in the development of the regulatory rules and requirements. And then I took the safety screening I had already created in my private practice. And I, with 2 other volunteers, Erica Messenger and Kristen Spear, 2 women I just have a lot of admiration for. And Erica is in medicine and Kristen is in pharmacy. And so they built out the pharmacological and medical areas while I continued to build out the mental health area. And together we co-authored the standardized safety screening that's now used throughout Colorado and has been picked up by Oregon. And I'm curious what New Mexico is using. I haven't seen, but I'm sure they're going to use some version of it. So that was really exciting. And we really promoted that being something that was always going to be free and available and not like a for-cost thing. We wanted to really reduce anything that was going to increase bars to access. And so now there is a board that is overseeing the updates and maintenance of that screening form, because as we all know, psychedelic research is moving quickly and we're learning new things every day. And so that form at the minimum is going to need to be updated on an annual basis. And so we've got this board that's committed to doing that.
You volunteered to do this, and you have your own business, and you have kids, and you are just like everyone else, very busy, and you believe in this so much that you decided, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and volunteer my time to make sure that this is as safe as possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
Period. Thank you. Thank you. And why isn't this more accessible in the United States? Why are we one of the only states that has this?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. From a policy, legal standpoint, we had the war on drugs and we had all these substances get put on our schedule, on the FDA Schedule 1. And I can go into the politics and theories behind why psilocybin ended up on that list, but that is a completely different podcast episode. And so I won't go into that right now. But so that's part of it, right? Is that psilocybin is considered a Schedule 1 substance by the FDA and so is federally illegal and has not yet been rescheduled. And so it is on a state-by-state basis that we're creating these acts and these regulatory programs that the state is approving under the awareness that federally still illegal, right? So there's, I think for doctors who hold DEA licenses and stuff like that, there's a level of liability and risk that some people are just not willing to take on, which I completely understand. I also think that there's a huge stigma against psychedelics because of the war on drugs era, the propaganda that was put out of ice cream scoops out of your brain and like your brain melting into your spinal cord and like, this is your brain on drugs. And it's like this, scrambled egg or whatever. Like, that's not true, but we were so inundated with that. Previous generations were so inundated with those images, those beliefs, that that's what was taught to us is like, this is a drug and drugs are bad and this is going to kill you. And so I think part of what we're having to do is this whole education initiative where we're overcoming the false stigma, the false narratives about what this is and what we're doing and why it's useful and the context in which it's relevant. And you'll never hear me say this is not relevant in a fun, social, recreational setting. Like, yes, psilocybin at a musical venue, listening to some soulful thing is going to be extremely powerful and profound all on its own. Be with people that you trust, be in a safe setting, know what you're doing beforehand, get it from a trusted source, test your medicine, all the things. That is still a relevant experience, but it's acknowledging you're not coming to your therapist's office or your facilitator's office to party. That's not what's happening. Your facilitator is not engaging in the medicine with you. We're not raving. There's no light shows, right? Like this is you have prepped. We've come to intention. You've created a really deep connection with your facilitator who is holding this safe container for you. And you're journeying inward. It's not about your external environment. You've got the eye mask on, you've got the headphones on, which no wrong way to journey. You can take those off. It's fine, but it does help you drop in and you're journeying internally. You're going to places within that you've never been before. And you're like peeling back the veil so that you can see beyond the rigidity of what has been propagated unto you. And so it's, and it's that same analogy, like all the way up the layers, like we need to peel back this veil and show people what this is and what this isn't. So I think that's a big part of it is legislation. And, I think that there's groups out there who do believe in some of the old information. And so they are afraid, they're afraid for their kids, they're afraid for their animals, they're afraid for their communities. I get it. We're afraid of the unknown, right? I get it. Understandable. Educate. We just need to educate. And no, it's not for everybody. This medicine, like anything else, is not for everybody. There are some people who won't respond well to this and shouldn't be messing with it. They will find that out in the regulated setting, whereas in the unregulated setting, there's a high risk that they won't until it's too late.
The thing that comes up for me when I bring this back to my work of business leaders and making work better is this statistic that 70% of people say that their manager or their leader at work has as much or more of an impact on their mental health as their spouse does.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of people who are heading into the workplace who are in charge of other people and they have not done any healing work themselves. And so they are bringing their own shit into the office, and then that is disproportionately impacting the people around them. And when we talk about the stigma, I've had people be like, oh my God, are you going to talk about this on the podcast? I'm like, absolutely, because For me, when you talk about it reconnecting me with my soul, there were lingering pockets of deep insecurity that I have held, that I have been aware of, that I have not been able to extricate myself from through 6 years of therapy and EMDR and all these things. And no matter what I do, I'm still bringing those into professional spaces. How I respond to people, the way in which I am showing up in the world. If I can't heal those parts of myself,
Right.
it is going to impact people around me. We know it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
We're watching how much this is healing people. There's tons of both data and research and anecdotal evidence. How do we convince other people? I mean, and I'm not being like, how do we browbeat people into doing this? But for someone who's listening, who's like, oh, I don't know what people are going to think of me, but I'd like to try it. How do we help them step into this and do their own work in this way?
It's things like what we're doing right now, talking about it openly and calmly and without fear of this is the thing. I think having the recent legislation and policy and programs that have been created is a major help in that it legitimizes and gives credibility to what we're doing here. And so it makes professionals more willing to speak freely about what they are and have been doing for a while and the things that we already know. And so I think that's a huge piece of it. And I think it's acknowledging that we need to talk about this just like we talk about any other medication or any other substance with ourselves, with our kids, with our coworkers, with teachers. If we want this to be safe, we need to make it familiar. What makes things unsafe is a lack of familiarity, right? So we need to make it familiar. Do I want my 16-year-old tripping on shrooms right now? Absolutely not. No. But do I want her to think that they're a drug to be partied with? No, I don't. And so I need her to be aware of what those things are before she goes to college, I want her to understand the sacred roots of this. I want her to understand that this isn't a toy to play with. I want her to understand that this is for profound self-transformation and expansion. And that if that is when she is at a point in her life where she'd like to do that, this is available to her with no judgment, with support. But I don't want her partying with it with her 16-year-old friends in the backyard. Like, no, right? So I think it's the more we can talk about this, like anything else we talk about, and normalize it in that way, that helps to reduce the stigma by increasing familiarity with what this is and acknowledging what it isn't. So I think the more people we can get at the table, the more collaboration we have and community partnerships we have of how to steward this in a really safe way. I think the other thing, took me back to your access question. Why is this not more accessible? I think because of the fear, because of the legal setting, right now there's no coverage for it. There's no funding for it. People are really scared, right? It's hard to even get insurance as a facilitator to do this work. Everything is really pricey because everybody sees this huge sense of liability and risk because they're not understanding that when done effectively, PrEP is amazing. And right, you just really need to make sure that your providers are doing PrEP and integration, and then you don't have to worry about what happens during the administration session. And because of that, and because there is no funding, all of this is personally funded by those of us in the industry, right? So if I want to go home and feed my family and be able to continue to sustain doing this, I have to charge out of pocket for it. And I have to charge for an entire day of my time, plus all the hours for PrEP, all the hours for integration. I have to pay for regulated medicine, which, yes, are mushrooms inexpensive to grow? They absolutely are. Can anybody grow their own mushrooms? They absolutely can. And I encourage you to do so. To get them tested, right? These cultivators are now having to take huge portions of their fleshes. A flesh is what you gather from one harvest. They're having to take huge portions of their fleshes to homogenize and send to the lab and have it all tested. And they're paying for that. And then it gets sent back to them. They then have to pay for compliant packaging. They have to pay for driving it everywhere. And so all of that cost gets added onto the medicine. And then I have to pay for the medicine, right? And then I have to pay for my training and I have to pay for my licensing. And because this program is not funded, how are we paying the regulators overseeing the program? Through our licensing fees. So as a healing center, I have to pay for a license. As an owner, I have to pay for a license. As a clinical facilitator, I have to pay for a license. As a training program, I need to pay for a license. And all of those licenses have to be renewed every single year. And then on top of that, I also have to pay for insurance, which right now is not less than $6,000 a year. And for the majority of us, we're used to paying about $600 a year. So when you look at all of these as annual expenses, and then I need the space to do this in. When we talk about, well, why are the costs so high? People keep complaining like the costs are so high, it's inaccessible. Right now, until we get funding, until people understand what this is and get on this bandwagon, it's going to be hard to streamline and reduce costs because the people in the program are the people funding the program.
Whew. All right. That'll bring us to our last question, which is, it's a two-parter that's kind of really just two questions smushed into one. So someone's listening, they do not live in Colorado or Oregon, and they're like, oh, I want to do this thing. Can they come to the Colorado and do this? Okay, fabulous. Yes, we will have all the show notes with all your information. And the future of the space. Are we seeing any hope that this might be more accessible? And what can people do to help make this so that you are not funding the whole damn thing yourself? How do people support this?
So I would suggest going to the Healing Advocacy Fund website. There's a lot of information there on what this is, how to get involved, how to support the programs, what different states are doing, all of those things. So I think that's a great resource. Informing yourselves, informing your colleagues. If you run a group practice, invite a trained facilitator, a natural medicine educator to come in and inform your group practice on what it is and what type of clients they'd be referring to this and what they, what does it help with and how does it support? Being able to contribute to research if you're willing to be a research participant. That research, all of the data from research is what we're giving to the FDA for rescheduling. The more likely we are to get it rescheduled, the more likely it is to get this covered by insurance to demonstrate cost effectiveness. So for those of us who are already doing this, demonstrating how is this reduced expenditure on other high level services that are from taxpayer money and other funding sources so that like those funding sources would say, hey, we're already spending this money. We're going to spend it on this because it's more efficient. Right. And so I think all those ways as we can start to gather and contribute to the evidence that this is more effective, more efficient, and less dangerous than almost anything else we have available to us, that's going to be the way that we can get this in. And we need to understand the languages we're speaking depending on which audience is in front of us.
The humans, Mikki Vogt. I will just underscore how profound this was for me, for my husband, for our relationship with our children, for my entire life. And to hear just a smidge of what you have done to bring this to the world, but also the individual experience that I had with you was immense. I literally saw you in person last night and I ran up to you and was hugging you like I was embracing my long lost friend. It deepened the connection that I have with you. It deepened the connection I have with myself. It is profound. And I have a deep and unending well of gratitude for all that you have done to bring this to space and to help people. It is incredible. So thank you. Thank you.
So glad. I'm so glad. I mean, and I think that's important. That makes my heart sing. I love it. It was so beautiful to see last night. That connection is so real. And imagine that being so much greater amongst so many more people, what our world would be like. So yeah, I just thank you. I'm glad the experience was so amazing for you. And it's the mushrooms, right? Like you find the person you're connected with who you can trust to keep you safe, but the awareness gained, the insight, the self-love and acceptance, that's your inner healer in the mushrooms. That has nothing to do with me.
All right, friend. Thank you so much for joining me on Unbehaved. If you're vibing with today's episode, I cannot tell you how much a good review means to me. You can find me on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc. I love hearing from you. Honestly, I read all of the comments, so please reach out. You can also look me up at meganfrenchdunbar.com or on the social medias to stay in touch. I think I'm supposed to have some sort of cheesy catchphrase here to wrap this up. But in the spirit of unbehaving, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to subject you to that. And I'll just let this epic stock music play me out instead. Bye-bye.